Good morning, everyone. How lovely is it to catch up with everyone? How lovely is it to be together again? And how lovely it is to get all fired up. There's been some lovely fiery conversations and, I know all of us carry the responsibilities of our ancestors. We carry the responsibilities of those who have gone before us. And so when we recognise we're in this important moment in time, we take those moments seriously, we take those moments respectfully, and we take those moments because we know these times may not come again. So I will begin, and I know everyone's coming from dumplings in the morning, right? And I know we've got big conversations that happened yesterday, we've got big conversations today, and we've got big conversations throughout the rest of the week. So I'll begin. Yep. And I've got my staff reminding me when it's time to, when I've got 5 minutes left. So if I speed up really fast at the end, you'll know, running out of time. Bringing it forward. The journey towards a national body for First Nations arts and culture. As the Executive Director of First Nations Arts and Culture at the Australia Council for the Arts, I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of the Australia Council to welcome you all, those in the room and those listening online across the country. Welcome to Purrumpa, the largest national gathering of First Nations arts and culture convened by the Australia Council in 50 years. Purrumpa is a historical occasion as we commence what will be a year-long celebration of 50 years of the establishment of the Australia Council's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Arts Board. And as we reflect on and celebrate the remarkable achievements of the First Nations arts and culture sector over the past 5 decades. You will be happy to know that we are committed to writing the history of the Aboriginal Arts Board, and my early conversations with Marcia was very much, I know you will want to write the entire story of the Aboriginal Arts Board. This was several months ago, and we do want your insights, but we've only got 45 minutes for the presentation this morning. So if you don't cover all of the important things that you would like to discuss, we will be writing the 50th anniversary of the Aboriginal Arts Board publication, so it's not lost to history. And we honour all those who have gone before. Yesterday was a day of respectful engagement and deep listening. Today we discussed legacy, and I thank Professor Marcia Langton and Craig Ritchie for your words this morning. I'm proud to be talking to you today about bringing it forward, an important report which has had a long journey and which consolidates a substantial amount of work on an important proposal, a national body for the First Nations arts and culture, which since 2008 has had a working title of the National Indigenous Arts and Cultural Authority, or NIACA. When I first joined Council, I commissioned this report. My aim was to better understand the outcomes of the national consultation the Australia Council led on a NIACA in 2018 and 2019. I wanted to understand its history and context and to present these findings back to you, our sector, the First Nations arts and cultural community. I wanted to present it back to you with transparency so that you can continue the discussion and self-determine any next steps we may make. The presentation today includes a summary of the NIACA consultation findings, and there will be opportunities throughout the week to discuss these further and consider what the next steps might look like. I know that there are many different perspectives on a national body, and that we must recognise is only natural. We are diverse people from many different nations across this land. We also have diverse businesses and cultural and creative practices. But I invite you to listen to these consultation findings and join with us in continuing this conversation with open hearts, open spirits, and open minds. I would also like to extend my sincere thanks to all those who have participated in the NIACA consultation and who have contributed to discussions about a national body and related issues over previous decades. And in particular, I would like to acknowledge the remarkable leadership at Council prior to my arrival by the Executive Director, Lydia Miller. Can I say she was not only remarkable in guiding and providing leadership at Council, but she also had remarkable colleagues working alongside her. And I do want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the remarkable leadership of Leanne Juniper Buckskin as well. Leanne, of course, was the first First Nation person appointed on the Australia Council Board. She, of course, was also the first female chair of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Arts Board at Council. And so Lydia aptly complimented and supported by Leanne Buckskin. And of course, you know, because we're all religious, it was a holy trinity, let's just say, because Wesley Enoch was right there too. Wesley Enoch, the chair of the First Nations Arts and Culture Strategy. So even though I stand here today reading you the summary of the consultations that have happened to date, I'm doing so because of all the hard work they have done previously. The Bringing It Forward report is a legacy document. It provides a historic lens on an important discussion, and I want to advise that this presentation also includes the names of people who have passed away. The report begins with the names and voices of elders in whose footsteps the Australia Council's current First Nations Strategy Panel and I are walking, as well as the voice of our sister, Nadi Simpson, who works beside us now as a member of the current panel. It is Nadi's words that I'd like to read out today on this concept of legacy and bringing it forward. At her powerful opening night address at the Sydney Writers' Festival last year, Nadi's son was in the audience and she spoke these words to him. Son, what it has taken me a lifetime to learn, what makes us important as sovereign Uluru, Murri, First Nation people is not what we achieve or how we adjust to acquire it. It is not our resilience or our ability to adapt and overcome. What makes us exceptional is that we've been bringing it forward. The oldest living culture on the planet, gifting our becoming to others down the line. You have to bring it forward, son. Everything that you are, the best bits and the worst bits, bring it all forward. Old and new, wins and losses, the joy as well as the pain. Pass it down the line. Your becoming, your Yilelu, your Burungu is precious. It is your inheritance. It is also the most powerful gift you will ever give. And can I say thank you, Nadi, for these beautiful words. And my apologies for incorrect pronunciation as well. This discussion that we're having and this presentation speaks to a national body, and it is an important conversation because it is about our arts, our culture, our knowledge passed from one generation to generation over thousands of years. It's about bringing it forward, holding and caring for our cultural inheritance and the journey of those who came before us. For many of us, keeping our arts and culture strong is an intergenerational responsibility that we carry close to our heart and spirit, a priority brought forward by our grandparents, taught and stewarded by our elders for the benefit of our children, our children's children, our future generations, and our stolen generations. First Nations arts and culture often get overlooked in the context of other needs resulting from intergenerational trauma. But our arts and culture give us our strength, our foundation, our identity, our hope. They give us our connection, our healing, our pride, and our well-being. The discussion about a national body is much bigger than the recent NIACA consultation in 2018 and 2019. It has a long history and is inextricably linked to broader conversations about protection of Indigenous cultural and intellectual property, or ICIP, and self-determination in First Nations arts and culture. Some of these discussions have circled around and around over the past 50 years and are now picking up momentum once again, giving us an important opportunity at this moment in history. The Bringing It Forward report includes a timeline that charts these developments from the first National Summit of First Nation Artists in 1973 and the formation of the Aboriginal Arts Board through to present day, including calls from founding board members Wanjak Marika for greater ICI protection after seeing his sacred works reproduced on a tea towel, and the establishment of the Aboriginal Artists Agency in 1976. The timeline also includes numerous inquiries, consultations and reports since 1981, through to the recent Fake Art Inquiry and the Productivity Commission's Visual Arts Study. Discussion of ICIP protection intersects with big conversations nationally and internationally that cover complex and sensitive terrain. Within the ICIP discussion, proposals such as a national authority, an authenticity labelling schemes, trademarks, and standalone legislation have emerged and re-emerged over previous decades, including many government-led consultations and inquiries. The research shows how high the consultation burden around ICIP protection has been, with very few outcomes. It is vital that any future discussions build on previous consultations and collective efforts and learn from the challenges faced along the way. The timeline also features reforms to increase self-determination in First Nations arts investment, led by Gary Foley and Chicka Dixon in the 1980s, and it tracks milestones in the development of organisational infrastructure for First Nations arts, including the rise and demise of previous national bodies such as the National Indigenous Arts Advocacy Association. This organisation coordinated the landmark Carpet case, the first legal win for First Nation artists in copyright in 1994, and also attempted a national authenticity label in 1999. When the National Indigenous Arts Advocacy Association was defunded in 2002, it left a gap in First Nations arts and cultural infrastructure at the national level, and the sector called for a national peak body through the Council's Making Solid Ground review in 2008. At the time, the Council had a National Indigenous Arts Reference Group who heard this call from the sector for a peak body for First Nations arts. Through Terry Jenke's work since the 1998 Our Culture, Our Future report, they also heard the call for a National Indigenous Cultural Authority, or NIACA, to protect ICIP. It was from the combination of these two proposals, a peak body for First Nations arts and a NIACA, that the idea of a NIACA was born. The addition of the A in the acronym was about a body focusing on the arts, a National Indigenous Arts and Cultural Authority. Between 2008 and 2010, the Council's Indigenous Reference Group developed this idea of a NIACA, which was endorsed at a historic meeting in 2010, including the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Arts Board and representatives from both funded and unfunded organisations across the First Nations arts sector. The Council's 2018 discussion paper built on this work, as well as ongoing sector discussion and needs. While progress towards a NIACA has not been a straight or easy road, it is an idea that has never gone away. And while the consultation in 2018 and 2019 used NIACA as a working title, a different name could be used for a national body in future as we continue this long and considered conversation. An important and powerful story in the Bringing It Forward report is acknowledgement of those who have contributed to 50 years of First Nation thought leadership, cultural rights advocacy, and investment at the Australia Council as part of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Arts Board, the Strategy Panel and Reference Group, and the inheritance of this legacy by the current Strategy Panel. We are deeply humbled by the list of names of those who came before us, and we honour the remarkable work they have facilitated and steward, and the gravitas of the leadership they have provided, starting with those who have served as chairs over the past 5 decades. This list also includes those who have served as directors and executive directors since the first Aboriginal director, Professor Gary Foley. And I particularly acknowledge again Lydia Miller for her remarkable work, leadership, advocacy, and representation in the sector over her many years. The many who have served as members of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Arts Board include remarkable eldership, such as Auntie Kitty Dick, Uncle Harold Blair, Uncle Mick Miller, Uncle Eddie Mabo, Auntie Udjuru Nunakul. As you can see, a remarkable list of eldership. For those of you seeing these names and seeing this detail, we do have hard copies of this report available for you all, as well as you are able to access it electronically. Some of the remarkable First Nation leaders of our time. You can see Uncle Ron Hurley. You can see Brenda Elcroft, Ellen Jose, Mark Bin Barker, Uncle John Moriarty, Gina Rings, Peter Batani, Richard Franklin, Melissa Lukashenko. And you can see the names of those First Nations, remarkable leaders who are involved in the National Indigenous Arts Reference Group. These remarkable lists include the National Indigenous Arts Reference Group, who developed the NIACA proposal back in 2008, and past and present members of the Council's strategy panel since 2014. I would also like to extend my thanks to the Australia Council's First Nations staff who have supported the NIACA consultation, including my 2IC, but really she manages really well. Upward, she manages me. Joe Brown, couldn't do it without you, sister, and of course, Trish Ajay. And also the many more Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander arts and cultural practitioners who have served on the Australia Council's First Nations art form subcommittees and peer assessment panels over previous decades. By providing you with the list of these names, you can see Council's dedicated First Nations leadership, decision-making, and determinations that come from both individuals, groups, organisations. For us, the First Nations art form subcommittees and peer assessment panels over previous decades have ensured the Council's dedicated funding to First Nations peoples, groups and organisations is assessed wholly by First Nation peer assessors and industry experts. The Council recognises the importance of First Nation people's self-determination, cultural authority and leadership to collective prosperity. The journey towards a national body for First Nations arts and culture has been a long conversation, and caring for the next step in this journey is a legacy that the current panel has inherited at a moment of great opportunity in this nation. We are in a privileged but responsible position, and we have a duty of care to share a record of it, to keep the conversation going and to keep bringing it forward. And that brings me to sharing the findings of the NIACA consultation the Council led as Interim Secretariat for the sector in 2018 and 19. The consultation involved a discussion paper, an online survey, written submissions, over 40 First Nation consultation forums around the country, attended by more than 500 First Nation people, regional summits coinciding with industry events and expert roundtables. The main findings of the NIACA consultation was overwhelming, but qualified support for a national body for First Nation arts and culture. All submissions, the overwhelming majority of consultation forums, and 88% of First Nation survey respondents told us, yes, there should be a NIACA. Responses included, I can't understand why there isn't one already. Yes, because it will bring First Nation people together to have a stronger voice. And it is so large, it is scary. But it could be the opportunity to have representation on a national level. As can be seen with this last quote, many participants who supported a national body also had fears, concerns, questions, or suggestions about its form and scope. I will come to these qualifications shortly. But first, to some areas of strong agreement. A strong theme of the consultation was around the current gap, lack, or need for a body for First Nations arts and culture at the national level, which we have not had since 2002. Responses include other areas such as health and law have national representation. Participants said that a national body must be First Nation led and run. Sovereignty and self-determination were key themes as well. Many highlighted needs for representation and influence on First Nations arts and culture in policy settings, including lobbying and advice to government, championing of First Nations arts and culture nationally and internationally, coordination of existing advocacy activities, and the importance of a national platform for First Nation artists and cultural practitioners' voices to realise better outcomes for our sector. While some of this as a collective voice that would be recognised and have authority and impact, the concern with this was ensuring that it does not homogenise diverse experiences. Some participants also saw opportunities for a national body to enrich Australia's culture and identity, promote cultural understanding, and support reconciliation. The need to support and promote and protect ICIP rights was a key theme of the consultation across submissions, survey responses, forums around the country, and industry and youth roundtables. For some respondents, ICIP was the most important issue to address, and it was a critical one for many others. The need for a national body to develop or oversee protocols that set standards for consent processes was frequently discussed as a priority. There was also strong agreement about the need for action to address fake art and cultural appropriation, and there was strong support for advocacy on issues such as legislative change and awareness-raising campaigns. Participants highlighted that cultural appropriation is an issue that goes beyond the visual art market. It crosses art form and cultural spaces and is also carried out by other First Nations peoples. Some highlighted the importance of protecting ICIP to keep culture strong for future generations. Across forums, supporting cultural maintenance and identity, creating intergenerational programs, and succession planning were raised also as priorities. The 6 activities that were rated high priority for a NIACA by the most First Nation survey respondents were developing protocols and facilitating consent for the use of cultural material, providing advice on ICIP and protocols, influencing recognition of First Nation cultures in policy settings, championing First Nations arts and cultures nationally and internationally, representing First Nation artists, cultural practitioners, and cultural custodians on policy issues, and ensuring First Nations arts and culture programs come from a position of cultural authority. Many participants also saw the value of a national body connecting artists to the services, networks, and supports already available to them, helping artists to navigate the industry and its pitfalls, and bolstering the work of existing organisations through a coordinated, strategic national approach. They called for an organisation that coordinates, supports, and champions local and regional decision-making and existing regional and art form-based bodies. Forum attendees agreed the model should ensure that the authority of local or regional groups, senior people, and communities is not undermined. They also stressed the importance of a model that is inclusive and decolonised, a non-hierarchical structure that reflects First Nation cultures, such as an Assembly of Nations. In terms of a legal model, 1/4 of First Nation survey respondents and 1/3 of all survey respondents said that they did not know what the best legal model for a NIACA was or chose to skip this question. Some consultation forums said it was too early to talk about the legal structure, or that the right one may not exist or be listed among these options. For example, the Coalition of Peaks is not incorporated and has no governing board or office holders. Its authority comes from its membership base of community-controlled organisations. Key considerations raised were inclusive participation and representation, particularly for regional and remote First Nations people, independent from government and corporate influences, a decentralised, non-hierarchical structure, and funding sustainability that avoids competition with existing non-profits. Forum attendees had various suggestions for funding and revenue sources, but ongoing or periodic Commonwealth Government funding was the most common response. For more on funding and revenue sources, you can see page 96 of the Bringing It Forward report. Many participants who supported a national body in principle also raised questions or concerns. We hope you see your voice in this report and want you to keep asking those hard questions as that strengthens our discussion. Areas of concern included its ambition. Participants said it should start small to be realistic and sustainable. Its need for funding sustainability in an already oversubscribed sector, and making sure there isn't a financial burden on artists or communities. Another area of concern included ensuring that it doesn't duplicate, compete with, or undermine the work of existing peak bodies or services, such as Artists in the Black. Another concern was how it will reflect the diversity of First Nations people and how power and authority would be gained and delegated. And in fact, the word authority, which is part of the NIACA title, was for many also a trigger word, who suggested alternative terms might be better forum or national body, alliance, portal, and agency, to name a few. There are also some conflicting views, for example, on whether it should have teeth. Some participants argued that if the NIACA were to be successful, it would need to have complete authority. And as I mentioned, others thought authority was the wrong concept altogether. Some forums discussed the challenges around a NIACA policing culture between First Nations people and in spaces of trauma. This included discussion of the stolen generation's rights to culture and concerns that it would become an exclusive club or gatekeeper that could hinder self or cultural expression. Counter to this was the argument that artists already navigate the challenging space of policing protocols without enough support. And finally, there were also conflicting views on the scope of cultural material it would cover. While nearly all participants thought it should cover the arts, some felt a national body should use a holistic approach by including other areas such as languages, screen, and cultural property. These are the survey responses to what should be covered by a NIACA. 95% of First Nation responders said that it should cover the arts, and around 8 in 10 said it should also cover screen, traditional knowledge, and/or traditional cultural expressions, including languages. Some forums said that a NIACA should cover the diverse practices and cultures of the many First Nations within Australia, including all art forms, languages, heritage, land, and biodiversity. Others argued that a NIACA should focus on artistic expression and the traditional knowledge embedded within it, as other bodies covered these other areas. Many thought this was a more manageable approach in which there was a gap and expertise to fill it. Despite these different views, the NIACA consultation found substantial agreement that a national body for First Nations arts and culture is needed to fill a gap in national infrastructure, and an idea that had traction was that it could be formed via a network or alliance of existing organisations across art forms and regions, underpinned by community decision-making and a national referral agency. Many participants spoke of the national body as an agile facilitator, coordinator, connector, or go-to referral agency, which could work both ways, acting as a portal to First Nations arts and culture for those outside it, such as industry and government, and helping First Nation artists to navigate existing networks and services and have their voices heard nationally. The need for a coordinating agency has been highlighted since the review of the National Indigenous Arts Advocacy Association back in 2002, 20 years ago now. This idea of an alliance and a referral agency as a two-way connector is an idea the sector could talk about more. It could provide a best practice doorway to our arts and culture, a doorway that opens both ways, making sure our artists and cultural practitioners' voices are heard nationally. I hope you will take this opportunity to reflect on this idea and discuss this throughout the week. As a sector, do you see value in coming together as an alliance and a referral agency to coordinate between our communities, networks and services? Is this an idea we could come together on? What might that look like, and what might the next steps be? Some immediate short-term priorities articulated through the consultation included forming a body that is First Nation-led with a clearly defined purpose, including strong and sustainable policies for a stable organisation, mapping existing organisation services and gaps, creating a space for conversation to be had between all art form communities and networks, and supporting established First Nation organisations, peak bodies, and our artists and creatives. And while there were some different ideas about the specific priorities and tools a national body would use, which could change over time, there was consensus about the core values of a national body: self-determination, empowerment, connecting and amplifying existing strengths, growing opportunities, and protecting cultural and creative rights for future generations. In consolidating the work towards a national body for First Nations arts and culture, the Bringing It Forward report takes a holistic view to capture intersecting areas of policy development, as well as industry advocacy and discussion over the previous 5 decades. The aim is to ensure the First Nation arts and culture sector is armed with a clear picture of work done to date, which does justice to the efforts, ideas, voices, and engagement of so many First Nations peoples and others. A national body for First Nations arts and culture could align with a number of policy opportunities in the current landscape. This includes the National Agreement on Closing the Gap that recognises culture and commits to developing and strengthening structures for shared decision-making with First Nation people, such as peak bodies. The potential for a national body to support recent draft recommendations from the Productivity Commission, including proposed cultural rights legislation, investment in referral pathways for artists, and a formal partnership for a shared decision-making with First Nations people to inform funding priorities. A commitment through the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Health Plan for investment in the cultural determinants of health. And of course, the new National Cultural Policy under development, which will have First Nation voices at the heart. The Bringing It Forward report is available on the Australia Council website, on the Research and Advocacy page, and on the Purrumpa page. And there are hard copies available here for you at the reception desk. And you can also email us at NIACA at australiacouncil.gov.au, and provide us with feedback on the consultation summary. We want you all to feel a part of this important conversation. Of course, there will also be opportunities throughout the week here at Purrumpa for discussing this idea for a national body, including facilitated discussions at 3:30 p.m. each day, and a session at 9:45 on Friday morning to share back to the broader group the deliberations and considerations that have occurred within these smaller gatherings across the week. It's up to us as a sector to self-determine the next steps on the journey towards a potential national body for First Nations arts and culture. Let's take this opportunity to listen and learn from all these efforts and ideas. We are the oldest continuing living culture in the world. Our arts and culture contribute to Australia's national identity. It does touch the hearts and minds of Australians and affect how we as a nation engage globally. Our arts and culture must be central as we strive for our rightful place of equity within the Australian nation. A national body for First Nations arts and culture led by us, for us, could be one of the important mechanisms that works towards this reality. Thank you very much.